We've reached the final major group of the ornithischians, and these are the ornithopods. So again, here is the cladogram that we've been operating on for the entire class. There is the node for ornithischia, and then we've covered the Thyreophora, the Marginocephalia, and what's left is the Ornithopoda. Well, if you dissect the name itself, it literally translates to bird feet. These are the bird feet dinosaurs when we judge them by their tracks. And you probably have heard, although we're definitely going to go over it later, but maybe you've heard that birds are living dinosaurs or are descended from dinosaurs. And it would be a logical assumption to make that they come from these bird feet dinosaurs, which are also part of these bird hip dinosaurs, but that's not true. Sorry for the confusion, but that's simply not it. So there we go. These are not the ancestors to the birds, although they've been described as the bird feet dinosaurs. Once again, these things are all herbivorous, and they have a geographic range from the Jurassic through the Cretaceous. They have several different bone features that define them. They're probably one of the groups that have the most number of workers on them because there's so many of them. And besides all the other bones that we've talked about before from the bone anatomy section, I'm going to add a new name here, and that's the maxillary. And the maxillary is the jawbone that holds your upper teeth, the upper tooth row. And incidentally, you have one as well. Well, they've got something else in the face of these ornithopods. They have a premaxillary tooth row. So you've got the tooth row in the upper part, that's the maxillary, and then see this little section over here that the arrow is pointing to and that my cursor is going to, that is the premax. The premaxillary bone, so the bone before the maxillary bone, and there's a tooth row there as well. There are these lateral processes that stick out, so the face has some sort of extensions of bone. It widens the face, it creates cheek pouches, which we've talked about before for the inset tooth row. And then another interesting thing here is that the jaw joint, where the dentary or the lower jaw touches the skull, is below the level of both of these tooth rows. Now compare that to our hinged jaw. Our hinged jaw hinges to our skull above the level of our teeth. So these have a low dropped tooth jaw joint. Okay? So those are some very important features of the face, including the new bone name of the maxillary for these ornithopods. Like most of these things, there's also a separate cladogram that's just for the group. And so here's the group of ornithopods. Here at the base, again, what this would have those maxillary features in all of these up here. Now, I've put X's over these two things, the Tenotosaurus and the Dryosaurs, which, again, we don't know where to put them, and they don't have a lot of specimens either, so we're not going to worry about them so much. But right off the bat, we're going to worry about two groups, these Heterodontosaurs and these Hypsilophodontids, as two separate families. You see they have the IDAE ending over here, and we'll do those two first, and then in the final lecture, we'll do these things way up here at the top of the cladogram. So the Heterodontosaurus, look again at the name. Hetero means different or multiple. Donto, teeth, lizards. So these are the different tooth lizards. A weird group. They are present only in a very small time frame and in a very small location. The early Jurassic of part of Africa, they're a small thing, only 1 to 2 meters long. So bigger than a dog, certainly, but far smaller than a horse. And they had various chisel-shaped cheek teeth with denticles on the cusp of the crown. But, so those teeth right there would say this is an herbivore. But they also had prominent canines or tusks, which were typically viewed as being indicative of, well, a carnivorous lifestyle. You've got to go catch something, kill it. Having large or enlarged canines is very good for piercing the flesh and doing that killing, but then you have a mouthful of herbivorous type teeth. So the thought is that these are not truly carnivorous, that those were more for display or for defense or some sort of intra-species conflict, and not for a carnivorous lifestyle. Interestingly enough, these have also been found in two general sort of size morphs, so we think that there is some sexual dimorphism going on. The genus Heterodontosaurus is the typical genus for the creature, and again you see this whole array of features here. It is bipedal. The lower or the hind limbs are much longer than the forelimbs. It had the dental battery as well, and here's a nice picture of a fresh tooth and a worn down tooth. It had the ossified tendons, but only in the back region. But here's an interesting feature. It had a fused tibia and fibula. So the lower leg bone is fused into one bone. That's very much like birds today, although again, these things are not ancestral to the birds. And then the tarsals, the various ankle bones, they've been largely fused together. They're not floating around. And the thought is everything that we look and see about this skeleton is that it probably was a creature that lived in great large groups. There were male and female separate morphs, and they were idealized or optimized for fast running. Now this next picture right here, this is an artist representation of a couple of heterodontosaurs, and you see here they are using these canines more in a display or intraspecies conflict mode than they would in any kind of carnivorous lifestyle. These then are contrasted with the group, the Hypsilophodontidae, and this has a wider display or biogeographic range. So all over North America, Europe, Asia, Australia, and we'll talk about those in the last section as well. They're global, and they were from the Middle Jurassic to the Late Cretaceous. So heterodontosaurs, because they're from the early Jurassic and just barely bleeding into the Late Jurassic, the thought is that they might be ancestral to the Hypsilophodonts, but don't know. We have lots of skeletons of these things. Where these things are present, they tend to be present in great, great abundances, and we have complete skeletons, plus eggs. Notice as well that this is a much, much larger creature, twice the size of the Heterodontosaurs. And the classic example of this is the genus Hypsilophodon. And if you look at the face of this creature right here, again, you see that there is no set of tusk canines. This also had a highly jointed skull. So instead of having solid bones sutured or cemented together, they were jointed, so they had a range of motion for these things, and they could rotate and move and accommodate their whole face while they were chewing. And again, there's the classic leaf-shaped teeth for these things. And here is an artist's representation of these. Again, a fanciful thing with stripes and color variations and a brightly, differently colored face. Who knows?